Hey everyone, and welcome to Bike Matters. Today we're taking a look at this, the Royal Enfield Guerrilla 450. This is a 452cc single-cylinder roadster that somehow costs less than the KTM 125 Duke. But is it any good? Stick around and find out as I give you our full review. Now, starting off with the looks on the Guerrilla, and Royal Enfield market it as a sort of roadster sort of styling, but I kind of feel like it doesn't really particularly fit well into any sort of category. It's kind of, as I say, it's mainly a roadster, but it's got bits of like scrambler and possibly even flat tracker about it, especially with this kind of tail configuration you have here. Especially when you consider it's got these scrambly sort of off-road tyres, the overall geometry and the riding position as well. Like I say, I feel like it lends itself more to kind of a combination of the three. Now, starting off with the colourways it comes in 5 different colourways. We have blue, yellow, bronze, silver, and also a black variant as well. But I feel like this silver variant actually kind of is my favourite one of the bunch. It has a really nice sort of matte metallic finish about it. It has a bit of a sparkle in the sun, and I feel like it really accentuates that kind of nice sort of design and sort of the lines that Royal Enfield have put into the tank, and also the tail unit here as well. Just a quick reminder, but if you're enjoying this video and want to see more content like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and also ding that notification bell. Now, as mentioned, we find a 452cc single-cylinder liquid-cooled engine in the Guerrilla 450. Now, this is the Sherpa engine that we also find in the Himalayan, and it comes with 39.5 horsepower and 40 Nm of torque, which makes it A2 compliant straight out of the box. Now, with it being a single cylinder, obviously all the powers come up top. Peak power comes in at 8,000 RPM, which is quite high in the rev range, but peak torque comes in at 5,500 RPM. So whilst the torque's quite low, the power sits quite high, and that does mean for me personally when I was riding this bike, if you want to make a bit of progress on it, you did kind of have to rev it out quite a lot and make a lot of progress that way, because a lot of the power it does stay at the top and not really at the bottom. It's also worth bearing in mind as well, because it's a single cylinder, you kind of have to match the gears quite right. If you have a gear that's a bit too high, being a single, it does get a little bit clunky and a little bit sort of notchy. So again, if you want to make the use of this bike, you want to have a bit of fun on it, just bear in mind the power comes in quite high. Now, if that isn't your main focus though, and you don't want the Guerrilla to kind of rag about a bit and you just want to use it for your daily commute, then that's fine, because Royal Enfield also fit 2 rider modes, which are controlled through this little mode button here on the right switchgear. Now, if you select Eco, it saves you a little bit of fuel and means it's just great if you want to use it literally just getting from work and back. But of course, mention of fuel as well, we have an 11 litre fuel tank on the Guerrilla, and because it gets about 80 mpg roughly if you take it easy, then that should mean if you put in about 14 quid worth of fuel with the current UK prices, then you should get about 180 miles of range out of it. And for my opinion, I think that if you're going to spend 14 quid on a day out, I'd say that's pretty reasonable for a day of fun on this. Now, as mentioned on the Guerrilla, we have Eco Rider mode to save a little bit of fuel, but we also get Performance Rider mode as well. Now, this is controlled, as I said, through this little button here on the right switchgear. Now, aside from that, we have this sort of standard Royal Enfield rotary switchgear. I think it looks great. It feels a really nice tactile feel to it as well. I really like this sort of switchgear that Royal Enfield seem to fit to pretty much all of their bikes. Having moved away from that though, we get this little USB Type-C socket as standard, which is quite nice to see. And we also get the Royal Enfield Tripper Pod as standard as well. Now, this is only on this £4,850 smoked silver option, and I found that when I was using the Tripper Pod, it worked well. Google Maps is quite quick to reroute if you take the wrong turn. But mentioning wrong turns though, I did actually find that because it's turn-by-turn navigation and not a specific map, when I was on sort of single track lanes, for example, sometimes you would find that you come to a junction and it would show you an arrow going left and also right. And it was like, well, I don't know which one really to follow. I did find it a little bit tricky to use, but having said that though, if you spend a little bit more from £4,995 to the other colourway options, you get the 4-inch circular TFT display instead that replaces this and this into one nice, neat, large sort of clear display that has, again, standard Google Maps navigation, but it also gains phone connectivity for messages, music, and everything else and so on. So my personal opinion would be, as much as I love the smoked silver option, you can't get the circular TFT display on that, so I would option for another colour if that was me personally, so I can get a nice, neat, large display. And when it's time to get insurance for your motorcycle or scooter, make sure to check out Lexham Insurance, who have provided an insurance solution since 2000 and have several exclusive schemes only available at Lexham. So make sure to go to lexhaminsurance.co.uk, link in the top right, to get a quote direct with them. Now, going back to the start, I'm remembering that this bike comes in cheaper at its base price than a KTM 125 Duke. You would kind of necessarily maybe assume that it comes with sort of a cheaper or budget suspension setup, but that's not really the case on this bike. At the front we find 43mm telescopic Showa forks, and at the rear we also find a Showa monoshock at the back as well. Now on the road it had a really nice sort of light flickable feeling to it. It felt really light on its feet and it didn't really have any problems with it at all. If I was being nitpicky, maybe it was a little bit sort of overdamped on some surfaces, it felt a little bit firm. But overall, it felt like the suspension was set up really well on this bike. It doesn't feel like Royal Enfield have kind of gone, oh, here's suspension front and rear from Showa and they've thrown it on. It really does feel like the whole bike's been developed with the suspension in mind, and it feels like an entire package. Some bikes I've ridden before maybe feel like they're a little bit overdamped at the front or rear, for example, and it feels like the back's doing something different to the front. But again, like I say, it's not really the case in this bike, and it kind of felt like the whole bike's been set up really nicely. And I think they've done a great job with the suspension on this bike, again, bearing in mind that this bike is sub 5k. Now, another thing on the Guerrilla that's not particularly budget spec is the braking. And at the front, we find a twin piston bi-brake caliper paired with a 310mm single disc on the front. Moving to the back, we find, just tucked around the other side, we find a single piston caliper with a 270mm disc. Now, of course, you know, it's never going to be a twin disc sort of Brembo setup, but for what it is, I was really confidence inspiring at all speeds. Whenever I needed to shed speed coming into a corner or stop in an emergency, never really a problem. And of course, we've got to remember as well that bi-brake is a subpar of Brembo, being called bi-Brembo with bi-brake. So again, you know, for the price of the bike being sub 5k again with Showa suspension and also bi-brake brakes, it's pretty impressive for the bike, and I think it was actually really confidence inspiring on all types of road. Now, another thing worth mentioning on the Guerrilla is the 17-inch wheels front and rear. Now, versus something like the 19-inch front and 18-inch rear that we found on the classic 650 we just reviewed, 17-inch wheels naturally kind of have a bit more turning speed and they're a little bit more sort of flickable on the road. I think it lends itself really well to this style of bike, being a roadster. And again, out on the road, when you combine it with the suspension and everything else, it has a really nice handling package overall on the Guerrilla and makes it for a really fun ride. Now for me, one of the biggest downsides on this bike, if I was nitpicking a little bit, would be possibly its weight. Now for a single cylinder 450, it comes in at 184 kilos, which I personally think is quite on the hefty side for a bike like this. But having said that, you don't really tend to notice the weight too much. Yes, it might be a little bit noticeable when you're kind of moving it around here in the studio, for example, but when you're out on the road, I think the Showa suspension front and rear kind of really tends to hide it well and makes it, again, like I say, feel really light on its feet. So that helps a lot. And also when you're sort of stopped at slower speeds in traffic, for example, the really low seat height of 780mm on this bike also makes it quite approachable. So you never really feel like you're kind of tipping each side. I can get my feet completely flat both sides and I'm 5'9". So again, you know, with the suspension on the road and the sort of the low seat at sort of lower speeds, the bike's not heavy, but it is quite heavy for the type of bike that it is. But the overall package of the bike makes it really easy to manage and it's not ever really a problem at all. Now, somewhat unusually on this bike in terms of lighting, we don't get a dedicated kind of tail light sort of in the back. Instead, Royal Enfield decided to put the tail lights around the edges of the indicators on the back instead. Now, I think this looks really nice. It cleans the whole rear of the bike up quite nicely. But for me, it indicates somewhat of a slight concern point. If you think about, like, if you're driving in the dark sort of throughout the winter and you see two small rear tail lights, you might mistake that for a car sort of being in the distance, whereas actually it's a bike rather up close. So again, I see why Royal Enfield have done it. It cleans the rear of the bike up. It has that kind of nice sort of possibly flat tracker style about the whole tail unit. But again, I do feel like with this design, that might be a little bit of a safety concern for me personally if I was riding it in the dark. But again, I think it's quite nice what Royal Enfield have done. It's nice to see it done something different as well. Aside from that, we find your standard indicators tucked inside the rear of the tail lights. And also, of course, you get your standard LED indicators at the front, and of course your standard LED round circular light at the front, which is again super bright. So the overall lighting system on the Guerrilla is quite modern, but I do find the rear end is a little bit quirky for me personally. If you're already considering the Guerrilla, you may wonder what else is available in a similar category. The KTM 390 Duke and the Triumph Speed 400 may be a better choice for you. Starting with the 390 Duke, it comes with a higher power output of 44 horsepower, albeit with slightly lower torque. It does however have nearly 2.5 litre larger fuel tank and manages to tip the scales at just 165 kilos, nearly 20 kilos lighter than the Enfield. Like the Guerrilla, it also has a 6-speed gearbox, but it does come with a 40mm high seat height, so it might not be a good option if you're a bit on the shorter side. It also comes in around £850 more, depending on colour, at £5,699. Another alternative is the Triumph Speed 400 with the exact same power output and torque, although it does come with a 2 litre larger fuel tank and 14 kilos less weight. It does have a slightly higher seat height, but this will likely not even be noticeable between the two. The shared specs continue with both the Guerrilla and Speed having 6-speed gearboxes and split analog LCD dashes, unless you offer a different colour on the Enfield, which will gain you a circular TFT display. Pricing on the Speed 400 starts at £5,345, so depending on colour, this puts it around £500 more than the Guerrilla. So, is the Guerrilla 450 any good? Well, I personally would say yes. I think it's quite surprising, to be honest, that a bike can be produced nowadays for sub 5k with show suspension, such great geometry and great handling as well. I think it's really a testament to what Royal Enfield have done on this. You know, as I said, I wasn't the biggest fan of this whole tripper pod setup, but I spent a little bit more and you can get the whole tripper dash. I think it's quite nice. Of course, it's a single, it's quite vibey at speed, but pretty much every single is. And I think better tyres would have been nice as well. Like I said, we get these sort of budget brand Seat tyres, but for the price, I think Royal Enfield have done a really great job on this bike. Overall, I think the Guerrilla 450 is a really fun bike. It handles great, in my opinion, it looks great, and it's also equally at home if you want to use it for the daily commute in eco mode. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.